Coming home, coming home inside. I remember who I am. I don't have to hide.
Welcome to SOS for the Soul, Coming Home. I'm your host, Jennifer Elizabeth Masters, transformational teacher, trauma recovery guide, and author of Unbecoming. This is where emotional healing meets embodied awakening. And each week we explore what it really takes to dissolve trauma, reclaim your inner authority, and remember who you truly are beneath survival patterns so you can live with clarity, confidence, and deep self-trust. If you're ready for real transformation, you're in the right place. Today, we're exploring a topic that touches every human life. Sadly, judgment. We judge others, others judge us, and often the harshest judgment of all is the voice inside of our own head. Judgment shows up in families, communities, religion, politics, and of course, social media. But where is it coming from? And why are humans so quick to judge? And what would it look like if we replaced judgment with curiosity and compassion? So that's where I'd like you to rest your heart on for the next few moments. So today we are joined by the delightful and beautiful Reverend Katie Donaldson. Katie first felt called to ministry when she was just 18 years old. Shortly after high school, by the time she was 19, she'd already received her first license as a minister. And even then, she felt a clear calling, as she described it. Her desire was to help people know that they're loved, that they matter, and they feel that they are truly seen. And that is a beautiful thing. I've experienced that with her myself. Over the years, that calling has taken many forms. Katie has worked in youth ministry, camp ministry, ministry abroad, and eventually discovered a deep love for preaching and teaching. Her academic journey reflects her dedication. She earned her associate's degree at the National Sciences from Santa Rosa Junior College, her bachelor's degree in sociology from Point Loma University, and her master of divinity with an emphasis on cross-cultural ministry. Interesting, we'll get into that, from Nazarene Theological Seminary. When she graduated with her master's degree, Katie was 6 months pregnant with her first child, and during her first United Methodist pastoral appointment, she discovered she was expecting her second child. Today, Katie may not be currently serving as a pastor within a church, but people in her community still honor her with the title Reverend, and that is what we consider her. So welcome, Katie. Welcome to SOS for the Soul. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here with you, Jennifer. I really appreciate the ask.
Well, I have so much to talk to you about because judgment is something that I've encountered with other people, with myself, growing up in an environment where judgment from my mother was rampant. I grew up being judgmental myself. And so it is something that in my spiritual journey, I know I've struggled with it. You know, I might see somebody on the sidewalk wearing clothes that I don't think are respectful. And I'm hearing my mother's voice in my head that translate as judgment. So why do you think people judge others?
I have to first mention, I love what you got there, that there seems to be this generational pass-on-ness Yes, you
Yes.
get to make up words at some point in your life.
Yeah, you do.
Um, and and I think that's kind of gets at the heart of it, right? Is we're almost taught how to judge from the very beginning, whether you want to or not. Um, and so when it gets at this idea of where do you think judgment comes from? I think it comes from honestly like the opposite of goodness and everything that is right. Because goodness and rightness is coming together. That's why I talk with my hands. So they come together. Versus as soon as judgment enters it, right? People's like shackles go up or they you have a division occur. That's not wholeness. That's not goodness. But we kind of naturally fall into that as human beings.
So do you think is it a self, um, is it self-criticism that comes out as judgment? Do you think that's what it is? Or is it uh, kind of an authority that I'm better than you and
I
and maybe
I
a
think
little.
it's more of the second. But I don't think it's intentional by no means, right? Oftentimes it's not because you can also judge in a positive way almost, right? Like, so you judge the person for, oh, I can't believe they're wearing that outfit, right? Like you said, like you find your mother's voice in the back of your head. It's real. Um, I can't believe they chose to wear that. There also with that can be that sense of envy, right? Of I wish I had the body that could wear that. I wish I had the confidence and the audacity to do something that crazy, to break outside of those norms that our world has put on us. Does that make sense?
Yes, so it's comparison in some ways then.
I think
Yes.
it's comparison and that natural instinct within us. Many of us, I haven't found a person who doesn't do it, so, but there might be someone out there who's good at not doing it. Of trying to be one above. You want to be better. You want to be perfect. You want to be the one that's picked for the game, the one picked for the job, whatever it is, right? It looks different every stage of life. And I think that's where then, um, depending on the voices you are, my minimal amount of childhood psychology classes and things I've taken and parental books and the like, right? I think that then that's where it then depends on what you are raised with. And that's where that voice in your head gets formed, right? Your kid comes home and says, "Ugh, I felt like I got made fun of today." Well, there are a lot of ways that the adult who's present can influence that negative experience for good or bad,
Right.
or they can allow it to be neutral, right? And it's those voices that then you hear when you're a grown adult as you're looking in the mirror or you're looking at other people. That's where I say, I think it's a lot of it is just added onto you, it's thrown onto you. I think that's where when once we become aware of it, we then, I think, have the job as decent human beings, um, to make the decision of, I don't want to live that way towards myself or towards others. I want to pursue that avenue that is good and right and bringing together wholeness in this world.
In my experience, I think judgment is one of the last vestiges, like when trying to be more like Jesus, trying to be more loving, right? Judgment, I think, is the last thing that we are able to eliminate. The low self, we can work on the low self-esteem and self-honoring and not abandoning ourselves. But that judgment piece, I think, it's very slow to unwind. And I want to ask you specifically about what you encountered at a particular church. Um, you experienced judgment, and I witnessed some of it secondhand. I want to just ask you, what was your interpretation of what was going on? And if you could share a little bit of your story, because I know your heart is in the place of wanting to share love and allow everyone to be seen. What a beautiful thing for your congregants to feel loved and fully seen. And yet you were judged. How so?
Yeah, so you and I met at my last appointment. So current city where I'm at in Ojai, right? And my experience was, I think sometimes one of the things as an individual, and then it gets into an institution, as an individual you run into is when you realize you're judging or you're being closed off, which often is a defense against judgment, right? Is you like, I'm just going to close off then. That often happens. You don't like anything new. You don't like anything that stirs the pot. It's risky, which it is. It is risky because you're potentially asking for something new, which is unknown, and that's terrifying. That's the whole natural fear, flight, like
Right.
response. It's literally ingrained in us.
Hmm.
And I feel like that's what I'm still processing it. It's been less than a year since I exited that appointment. But I think that's what I ran into. And so verbally, when I first arrived at the church almost 3 years ago now, I was told, well, oh, thank God you're coming. We need a pastor who's willing to get out in the community. I was like, I found my people because that's what I'm called to do. That's why, like, the cross-cultural ministry emphasis, the sociology, like, I love people in society. And unfortunately, with that, I tend to dislike the things that divide us. And oftentimes, buildings do that, or titles and different things like that. And so I came up like, oh, they're open to this change, this newness. Before they even knew who I truly was, like they knew. And so I went out on a limb of being authentically myself, which is what I feel called to be as a leader, to be authentic, to be vulnerable. And I have no regrets about that, actually. I've done leadership where I try to fit a mold. That hurt a lot worse than this right now because I have no shame and I don't feel any guilt about anything I did. Versus when I'm not authentic, I feel guilt about it. I start judging myself. I try to be something I'm not. Um, but it also at the same time, it made it harder because once it became clear that the church did not actually want the change, they did not actually want my emphasis to be outside, that they wanted better Sunday morning worship or better sermons or whatever it is, that either I would be stretched way too thin and I wouldn't be good at anything, let alone my health, which went down the drain the last couple years. And yeah, and so by the end of it, just felt really judged in terms of, yes, on paper, it sounds beautiful to have a pastor who wants to go find the people. One of my favorite verses or stories of Christ is going out, leaving the 99 to find the one. Because the 99, in theory, those are the ones that already have met Christ, who already understand that they are beloved, right? So the shepherd, Christ, who we're trying to emulate, right? If you are trying to be like Christ, guess what you're going to do? You're going to potentially, if it's your calling, which I feel like it is mine, I'm going to go find the one. I'm going to go meet the Jennifers and the Lynns and the Carols. Like these people I don't know yet. I don't even know their spiritual journey because that's not the point. The point is I want them to know that they are loved and they are beloved already, period. And the judgment came when that just wasn't enough. It wasn't helping the people in the congregation feel that love. And something I found out early on, in a wise soul, also known as my therapist, said, you can't force people to trust you. You also can't force yourself to earn it. Like, that's also not how it works. It comes from shared life experiences. And if people aren't willing to do the shared life experiences with you, if they don't have that interest, you can't force it. And so, Jennifer, even though you and I have known each other less time than I was at that church with some of those congregants, you and I have way more trust than I did with most of that congregation, because they didn't show up to things, and they didn't want to. They didn't actually want that change, which became really clear. And that's where
Well,
the judgment comes in from that, right?
I'm
From me not
I'm an
being
empath.
enough.
I'm an empath, Katie. This is making me want to cry because I feel what that did to your heart. You know, that
Well, you saw me right after too. So,
you were out there with your heart on, you know, for all to see. So looking back, and I know hindsight's 2020. If you had a chance to do it over again, and we're going to get much deeper on this, but I just want to finish this little asset of this story.
mhm.
Would you do it differently if you were to do it again?
There might be a, like, I would still do it. I would still I'm this weird spot in the United Methodist Church with getting an appointment, because I'm not an ordained elder yet, or deacon. I'm not ordained yet. So in theory, I technically am allowed to say no, thank you. I would still say yes, please. I have no hesitation about coming to Ojai. I have no hesitation of pastoring at that church. The relationships I made and things like that, priceless, within the church and outside of the church. There are some conversations that is the hindsight of like, oh, that's where it started to go wrong. And I didn't know the history yet of the past for why things went wrong, like glitter in the church. I near lost my job over saying I want to do confetti in church with paper. But when I said confetti, they went to glitter, and glitter and confetti are different things. But anyways, there's hard feelings around glitter in the church that I didn't know. Um, and so I didn't know that I needed to explain, oh no, it's this instead. That type of hindsight, which seems so minimal, but
Oh,
again, people and institutions, they have a longer history, especially if you're new. That's something you learn in seminary and school is, some people say the first 100 days you do absolutely nothing. You just get to know the people. There still are things like, is glitter okay or not? Confetti okay or not? You're not going to know. But things like that, I'd redo those little conversations. But who knows if I would have picked up on it or not.
it's such a small detail, such a small detail. I mean, and yet it obviously it got
Had
under
me get a
somebody's.
person.
What's that?
I had a person step off my trustees board over it.
Really?
Mhm.
Wow. Okay.
And they don't remember that though, so that's interesting. But it is on paper, so we're fine.
So
So, things
how
like that.
how did the experience affect you personally?
As I said, being in a job, it's a job. In the end of the day, like, yes, I'm a pastor. I'm still a pastor right now. Being called to do what I'm called to do, that doesn't stop what if I'm actually serving a church directly. And some people will disagree with me on that, and we could have that debate later. Um, but leaving it has been very freeing.
Interesting.
Still, yeah, I know. I'm still figuring that out. And part of it is like my larger story as a pastor, because I've moved denominations before, and that time was not by my own accord. This time it was. I said I need to be done. Um, and I'm glad, because now, and again, hindsight, there are so many things I was unaware of while in it.
Right.
So I was unaware that my family was feeling, I have a 6-year-old and 3-year-old. And when we started to, sorry, the church had me go to part-time um, a bit before I quit. And being part-time, I stood up that means I have a Sunday off every month. And they tried to fight me on that. And my boss came to my aid, and I'm very grateful. And so we started attending another local church on that Sunday. And it became apparent real fast to me that my daughter didn't like going to my church.
Wow.
She'd ask, well, where are we going? We're going to church, baby. Like, I have to preach. That's why I'm like, I wore a collar and stuff. And she's like, can I stay home? And
Oh,
which, for the record, I would. Like, if she sincerely did not want to go to church, I would do that. But I didn't see it. I didn't see it until I was like done. I turned in my notice, but I had to finish off my month. And then I saw it and I was like, how long have you been asking me not to go? Like, I literally do not know. Because I know it didn't start right then. It had to have started before that. And she absolutely loves going to the new church we go to. Um, she feels loved and adored, and like she matters, and she has a place, and she has friends who are not necessarily her age. They're just grown adults who give her cookies at snack time and don't judge her for running in circles. Like, but she got so much judgment
okay. Let's
at
talk
my
about
last
that.
appointment.
Let's talk about that
There's
because,
your word.
oh, yes.
I didn't even realize till I said it.
being being a mother and a grandmother, uh, if my children were hurt, that would hurt me too. Probably,
Hmm.
I would be more concerned about my children being hurt than myself. I could deal with a lot. Holy cow. How did that impact you?
It made it easier for me to leave.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think um, if I did not have children involved potentially, I would be like, okay, yeah, no, find your new pastor and then let me know when I can leave. Like, gives me extra time to pack, whatever. But I was the one that said, I'm done. I need to be done. I can't do another Advent. I cannot give up another holiday season to this. I don't have the energy or the capacity for it. Could I have forced it? 100%. Did I want to? I was done. Um, and so the
Can
judgment
you
on my kid,
can you specifically cite what type of judgment your children had received?
they weren't they weren't allowed to be kids. Um,
What do you mean by
and
that?
so great question, because it was an anonymous, this is one of my things later. If we get to it, I'll talk about. It was an anonymous complaint multiple times. So I couldn't actually even ask, what was it about the children that was distracting you from worship? Which, by the way, first, I don't believe children are a distraction. Um, I just, I don't think that's a thing. Two, um, I also don't think they are children and we are the worshipers. I think y'all are the worshipers. So you literally, when my children were said we don't want them in the service during the sermon anymore because they're too distracting, you literally just kicked out an age group of people from worship. And they didn't see it that way. They thought, no, we want to make sure they have good, like age appropriate teaching. I was like, nobody else here has the training to give them age appropriate training. And they didn't, which is why they didn't want to go to church anymore. Um,
So there
yeah,
there are expectations, obviously, that were set, were very high. Now let's talk about the demographic.
yes.
That might have something to do with the judgment, right? Because
On
I
a
know
couple,
I know how my mother is about children.
yeah.
What was the
And
truth?
and it affects it on a couple levels, right? There's one other judgment I didn't get at, but I think I will now. The age is above the age of 60. Probably above the age of 70, but I want to be generous and say with a handful of people under the age, of 70, 60. They're older. And yes, they have hearing aids. Yes, we actually did have the equipment to tie in their hearing aids to the speakers if they wanted, and nobody used it. That's fine. So that's the age. And the other judgment that happened that I want to mention is my daughter got it a lot more than my son. And I remember speaking with my lay leader about it, and he's like, no. And I was like, look at this. And I told him a couple specific instances. And he's like, I honestly, I don't want to believe you, Pastor. I don't want to believe that people are being sexist against a child. And he's like, but I'll pay attention. And can I talk to you about it later? I was like, please do. And sure enough, that next Sunday, he's like, Pastor, can I talk to you in your office? I was like, please. So I knew what was coming because I saw it happen. And all it was, and it's little things, right? And it was that my son, who was 2 at the time, was invited to go get donuts with the matriarch, one of the oldest ladies of the congregation, took his hand and they said, let's go get some donuts, Shay. While he's right standing next to Sam. And then she looks at Sam and says, pick all that up. You need to clean up better.
What?
And you know what Sam did? She picked up the toys. And then she went and she got the donut. I was too far away to confront the person because I would have.
Wow.
But I saw it out of the periphery of my eye, and I saw my lay leader standing close by. I was like, he's going to see it. Because I also know this is the person who's done it multiple times to my daughter.
Mm.
And no, I never had a conversation with her about it, not directly. I think if I would have stayed, I would have. I know I would have, but I think
Interesting.
it's a cop out.
I was going to ask you the sex of the person involved, but you already gave it up. Is a
Oh
female.
it's a old lady, like lovely lady. Like, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but like it's one of those things, and I think it's a cop out to say it's just that generation. No, everybody can grow, everybody can learn, and you also can make a personal decision that you don't want to.
Well, here's the thing. What did Jesus say about children?
I had a congregant, so in the middle of worship, we got there. Shay was only my youngest. He wasn't a year yet. And so we had him in worship, and my nanny, my husband, would be in the back with him, and he would make noise. He's an infant who was still taking milk and would gurgle and laugh and all the things, right? And it was a new concept. This church has no regular children attenders, not one. And so it was a new concept to have children. And again, at first, they're like, oh, this is great change. Look at us. And then they realize, oh, but then that means we have to change how we do things. And which includes, we need to be okay with a little bit of noise, natural noise. I'm not saying loud toys, but gurgling sounds or little chuckles. There's one congregant, and I love this man. He, every single time, no matter what part of the service we're in, the middle of a prayer, a song, the sermon, meditation, he would say, he would quote Jesus, and he'd do it better than me right now. But bring the little children unto me. And he'd verbally say it out loud, loud enough for the whole room to hear. And every time it made me feel less shame for bringing in the distraction, right? And that's that judgment that I took on. And every single time that
do you think
man
he
melted
sensed it? Do you think he sensed what you were feeling?
I don't know. Like I got to know him pretty well, and I don't think he's very he's empathetic, but not empathic, intuitive. Yeah, like not that type of emotional connection type of a thing. But he loved children, and specifically in church. He did in the past. He was the only person who volunteered with my youth group with me, other than my nanny, and he would volunteer with Vacation Bible School. Like he used to volunteer with camp ministries a decade ago, like before I got here. Like he's very passionate about the younger generations. And so honestly, I think it was less to do with me and more to do with he knew what people were thinking. And he knew that that's not okay.
Wow, interesting. Well, um, I have heard that there are no more divisive than Christians or a particular religious sects within their own.
Mm.
Very divisive. What do you feel about that, Kate?
Hmm. I'm thinking about the different, like, history of religion as a very broad statement, right? If we're going to make that assumption that Christianity is the most divisive, um, I think modern day, I feel comfortable making that assumption. Um, Historically, I'm less inclined to say that just because there was so much more, there's always been that this is our group. And you can see that in all the different religions, I think. I feel pretty confident saying that. Even if it's a matter of this is our region
Mm.
of whatever. And so maybe the dividing lines were different. I think today there's enough studies out there that I am comfortable calling out, which is Sundays are the most divisive days of the week, the most
Interesting.
divided days. And it's because people like homogeny. You like things that are like you.
Like
That's
you.
why you will have the churches that speak one language and they'll meet in the same building as another group that speaks another, but they're not the same church. They're two different congregations that may not know a single name of the other person. They're not a church. They're two different congregations. Um, and so that type of a thing. But again, that's natural in humans to separate because you want the familiar.
Familiar.
And that, yeah, and that just goes to, and it's more than just language, it's how people appear, it's the linguistics of it, it's all the different factors. What type of music are you going to want to hear? What scriptures do you want to study? What, so on and so forth. So I think current day, probably, I feel comfortable saying it's Christianity, but that's also because I think Christianity being a bit younger in terms of itself, right? So Christianity does have the First Testament as some people call it the Old Testament. That's part of our creed. We have that, and that is Judaism at its core. So we go all the way back. But Christianity alone on its own 2 feet, like that's new. We're less than 3,000 years old. That's new. Of course, we're still trying to figure it out.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to ask you is about the mental picture that
Mm-hmm.
people had of what their minister should look like. Do you think the judgment had anything to do with how you looked, how you appeared, the fact that you were female?
Oh, yeah. Um, but it's not new, right? Especially being in ministry for so long. Being new, I used it in this interview already, is y'all. That was one of the first complaints I ever got. I wasn't asked, why do you say it? Or anything like that. It was actually a judgment right off the bat. Like, I understand that you came from Kansas City. No, I'm from California, actually. Oh, okay. Well, people are having a hard time with you saying y'all. And I was like, okay, that's how I say everybody. But everybody it doesn't flow as well for me. Y'all just flows naturally for me. So I prefer that word. And I knew this just is a thing. If I was a man, they wouldn't come up with me with that. Why? Why would they?
It seems like splitting hairs.
Hmm.
So what
Or
do you,
one of my favorite things was I wore just because this is a female thing, because most men don't wear eyeshadow. And I wore green eyeshadow on Pride Sunday, my first year. It was distracting.
People told you that?
It made it into my report to my boss.
Really?
Was like, are you serious? I was like, please go read their review of me. I promise I'm actually doing better than what this sounds like. But yeah, like it was little nitpicky things like that. And if you talk to male ministers, like nobody ever gives me any cred about any of that type of stuff. It's like, I know. Like all female ministers know this. We know going in that we're going to be judged because in general, it's just we do. Sorry to tell you if you are unaware, we do still live in a patriarchy where men are held higher than females. It shows in our wages, all the different things. It's one of the reasons why I went to get my master's of divinity versus my master's of theology. Divinity is held to a higher standard than theology majors. I do not think I'm above a theology major, for the record. But it makes it easier for if somebody sees me against a man who's a theology major, they put me up here for some reason. I'll take it. It gets me one thing ahead. Sure. Why wouldn't I? Like, that's just the mentality you go into when you go into leadership as a female, is how can I stand out more? And you have to work your butt twice as hard. And you still get complaints about your eyeshadow.
Wow. Well, I was going to ask you how expectations shape judgment, but there you go. It's like, well, the eyeshadow. Do you think culture has become more judgmental with social media, and everybody seems to be able to comment on each other, on each other's life, and well, even the way you speak.
Yeah, I was hoping you were going to ask something like this. No, I don't think so. I think it has allowed us to expand who we judge. I don't think it has changed how we judge. I think judgment has been around since the beginning of time. You see it very early in almost any religious document of some moral story about judgment, of how like humanity has judged each other, for the record. And I think, yeah, now it's easier in the sense, well, not easier. People are meaner when they judge on social media because you can do it without a face.
Oh,
It's one of
yes.
the reasons I did the cross-cultural ministry emphasis. And I know you don't know this, but one of the reasons I did that is because I was having a really hard time with the church and with God. And I was like, I don't want to study any of that. I'd rather study people and culture, cross-cultural ministry. So that ended up being my like fun thing. And that's more of my core of who I am. And then the other stuff fits into that core. And so I think the judgments always happened, whether it was in a wheat field back in the day or the grocery store that you had to walk 12 miles to, whatever, like you still judged. Did you hear what Jennifer bought from the grocery store the other day?
And how
Yeah,
much
how
of it?
dare she? Like
Mm.
that type of stuff. But today it's easier because you can get onto social media and you can anonymously say, Jennifer went and bought all the ice cream from aisle 13. Can you believe it? She probably did that just to spite me. I highly doubt it, but I'm glad you got that off your chest. Like, and you can be, I want to say, more petty about it. And that's where the anonymous, I tie in the anonymous thing with that, is you can't work with anonymous things. So it's called triangulation, where
Right.
people, instead of talking directly, that lovely communication, they go ahead and they go to somebody else and they say, hey, have you heard what Jennifer did? I just can't believe it. The proper response is, hey, have you talked to Jennifer directly about it? I think you probably should, because she probably has a reason. And then you find out, oh, hey, Jennifer, I heard that you bought all the ice cream off of aisle 13. Who told you that? Somebody. Well, you can't work with somebody. But if somebody came to you and was like, hey, Jennifer, I saw you bought all the ice cream from aisle 13. What in the world is going on? I'm having an ice cream social. Can you believe it? And I needed that much ice cream. There it is. Nothing bad about buying all the ice cream off of the aisle.
Just ask.
Just that. Be direct about it without any judgment present, just that curiosity. And I don't think that's new. That's why I don't think the judgment is happening differently. I think it's just broader because of globalization, because we have the means to know more. And I don't think that's wrong. I think that's just our new reality as humanity. We now know everything, or we can if we so desire.
We
And then
think we do.
we think we do. And then we get to make the decision of what we do with it.
I wanted to look at this.
Oh, what a concept.
um, Judge not, lest ye be judged. So,
Mhm.
what do you think Jesus meant by that?
So, knowing that this lovely interview was going to be on judgment, I went ahead and did what I do. I did not study Greek in seminary. I'll just let you know right now. I did take it for funsies during COVID, though, because you had to do something, and that's what I like to do, is study language. But in preparation for this, I went ahead and I looked up in scripture what word is used in the New Testament, which would be Christ's words for judgment. It's krino. Sorry if I'm saying it terribly. But it's krino, which, yes, can be translated to judge, oftentimes in English. But I love when you actually parse it out more, which is it means to separate or to make decision about something. You get to make the decision. You get to decide if you're going to separate that thing. And so the judge not lest ye be judged. Well, do you want to be separated from God? Do you want to be separated from society? Do you want to be separated from your family because you chose X, Y, or Z? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It
Versus
does.
I think oftentimes when we hear judge, we make a connection with like justice, which just pure coincidence, they're two J words. That's just English. That's not other languages.
Yeah.
But I think we often tie them together because that's how we work often. And so we think like, oh, it's justice to judge somebody, to say they're good or wrong. That's actually not what that word means.
No.
It doesn't have anything to do with justice. I think it gets a lot more at the heart of what Christ constantly was doing, which was, what is the greatest commandment? Love the
Love
Lord
your
your God with
neighbor.
all your heart and all your,
Oh,
with your whole being. And similarly so, the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself, right? If you're judging people,
you're doing the
where are you
opposite.
loving? Yeah, where are you loving God in that? Where are you loving yourself in that? And that I know, silly ice cream narrative that I'm going to stick with now. I'm sorry, Jennifer, but like
I'm going to have to go
poor
buy
person.
ice cream.
Yeah. Can you imagine how much stress that person put on themselves trying to figure out why you bought the whole aisle of ice cream? You know how many phone calls they probably made to try and figure out that mystery versus just calling you? Like how silly. Um, the same thing for going back to why my kids are judged in service. I still don't actually know how they were a distraction. Nobody ever came up to me directly to tell me how.
I'll tell you how.
I, yeah, I never knew. The first week, there was one thing with Sam. She went and danced on, like, near the altar, which, humble opinion, not a big deal. But it was a big deal, apparently. So, you know what I did? Because I was told directly what it was. Hey, Sam, I need to set a boundary, and you can't come up these steps unless I say you're invited, okay? There's fire up, there were candles. There's fire up here, and there's things that are really breakable. And you know who never came up there after that? Sam, unless I said it was okay. Like, and she didn't know. That's not her, and she didn't need to know that as a kid, but that's where that came from. This anonymous complaint about what's going on, that they're a distraction. I don't know how they're a distraction. I can't work with that.
I sat through a service where they were in the service, and I found them nothing like that at all. They were not a distraction. They were a delightful addition, in fact,
Yeah,
handing
I was
out
like, the
little
service you
cards.
were at, they were distracting. So
No, they're as sweet as could be. I found them to be very well behaved.
thank you.
So the next verse I want to talk about just a little bit, and it's John 8:7. Let him who is without sin cast the first stone. And What does this story tell us about humility and our tendency to condemn?
Yeah, I think that gets back at what we talked about earlier is one of the reasons we condemn so often is because we're trying to put ourselves at a higher bracket than somebody else. We seem to have all this self-righteousness of, but I'm doing it right.
Hmm.
You're doing it, like literally, you're pointing down at somebody. That's what condemning is. You can't believe that. Um, but big surprise. Who's actually like looking at the big picture of the story of the earth, of the universe, of humanity? It's not
God.
us, it's
Yeah.
God.
God.
And that's where the judgment is going to come in. And oftentimes people think, oh, God, God's going to judge me. The amount of times that I've had people say, thanks for the invite, Pastor, but I don't want to bring lightning into your congregation. Like, and yes, there's a degree of humor in that statement. There also clearly was a degree of trauma from past experiences in church in those statements
Mm.
of being afraid that they were going to be condemned by the divine for whatever they did here on earth. Nothing we do here on earth is new. Badness has been badness. Goodness has been goodness. And we should be striving for the goodness. Like, you're not going to get judged by God with lightning.
Well, I have something
Um,
I want to ask you about, and it's a bit of a diversion, but not. I
mhm.
was in the tunnel of light in 2014,
Okay.
and what I experienced was no judgment. There was no judgment. When I said, I guess they're taking me to show me the other side, the guides that were on either side of me didn't say, no, you're wrong. Boy, are you stupid. I could tell they didn't agree, but there was no judgment. So
Yeah.
what's that indicating about what the afterlife is going to be for all of us? What's is God really going to judge us, or is it us in heaven that judge ourselves?
I actually, somebody talked to me about this today a little bit, and it was actually from a book they've read, which unfortunately I don't know the title of, so I can't recommend it. But they highly recommended it, and it's actually written by an atheist. And it got at that idea of what the afterlife is, but that kind of a purgatory-ish, like that phase like after death, but before you're in heaven. So call it a tunnel, whatever word you want. There's a
Barda?
bunch of different, yeah, there's a bunch of different traditions of what words are used. And one of the ideas is how can we expect people to be loving in heaven if they haven't been loving here? I've never actually considered that before. For that's where the judgment comes from is, well, are you going to be able to love your neighbor if I let you through? Um, I've never considered that before. Like literally just this morning had that pop up. But in terms of what you're saying, what I have thought of and contemplated, two parts. One, I don't think we have a clear answer of what the afterlife looks like. I think a lot of it is so mysterious, which I think is beautiful. And I think every religion has that aspect, right? Nirvana, whatever. Like it's mysterious. But it's beautiful. It's right. It's good. We all can agree on that. Um, and with that, I don't remember which verse it is off the top of my head, apologies, but it's from Revelation. And I remember when I took the course of Revelation, because when else am I ever going to want to study that book of the Bible? Now it's my favorite book of the Bible, by the way. So I'm really glad I took the course. But it's, I think the last chapter or the last two, pretty sure it's the last one of Revelation, it mentions the gates of heaven. And within it, it specifically says the gates of heaven will never be closed to anyone. So if there is something like a purgatory or a time of where there's a need for self-reflection or whatever, well, guess what? The gates are never closed. So you get there and you're like, oh, this is beautiful. But this is really weird. I'm probably dreaming and I want to go back. I don't know, right? Like, well, guess what? You will get a round two if you so desire to make the decision of would you like the peace and the goodness, which is a mystery, sure, but would you like that? I don't think a lot of people are going to say no to it.
Well, all I know is that it's a way more loving place than this planet is. Way more loving.
100%.
So I have some questions for our listeners, Katie. And these are things that you've spoken about. You know, what I'd like you to look at is, have you ever been judged unfairly for who you are? I know I have been. Have you ever caught yourself judging someone before knowing their story? How often does that happen? You see somebody, maybe a homeless person, and you have no idea. I've had a homeless person stay in my home, and he was the most generous person I have ever met. I was just absolutely blown away, and so clean, cleaner than me. So there are some things that we have in our mind about certain types of people. What would happen if we replaced judgment with curiosity? We talked about that too, Katie. And most of us have experienced this from both sides, being judged and judging others. So my final question for you is, if there's one thing that you'd like people to remember about judgment and compassion, or maybe a lesson to be taken away from this, what would it be?
So go read the book Compassion by Henry Nouwen. I'm pretty sure it's Nouwen. It's one of my favorites. My takeaway would be you don't have to be perfect. But I know people don't always like when there's a but or a comma, but you are supposed to be growing physically, mentally, emotionally, growing into a compassionate soul for yourself, for others, for the world. So it's a little less of a reprieve to get wherever's next. Because I think, at least for me in my faith, here and now is filled with the divine, is filled with thin space moments where, oh, there's that beautiful thing I wish I knew before. Why didn't I see it sooner? So go hunt for those compassionate moments, those beautiful God-given gifts. They're right here, right now. You just have to be willing to see them in yourself and in others.
That's beautiful, Katie. It has been a joy and a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for sharing from your heart and so authentically. I love you, Katie.
Love you too, Jennifer. Thank you.
If something resonated in your heart today, that your nervous system is recognizing truth. I work with people ready to release old programs, old emotional patterns, and step fully into their next chapter to be able to live in joy and peace. You can book or learn more at my website, jenniferelizabethmasters.com. And if you're a host, producer, or event organizer looking for conversations that bridge trauma, healing, consciousness, and embodied leadership, I'd like you to connect. And next time, remember, healing isn't becoming someone new. It's unbecoming everything you were not meant to carry. Katie, if there is a way that people can reach out to you if they would like to, do you have resources or a contact where people can learn more about you?
Yeah, for sure. I will actually just make sure to pass them along to you, Jennifer. So
Okay.
let me know if anybody needs to get a hold of me, and they can.
I will. They will be at the bottom of this show. I will have those posted for you. Thank you so much for being here, Katie.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Coming home, coming to disappear.